Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. At this moment, Donald Trump is far, far from home, landing in Saudi Arabia this morning on his very first foreign trip since taking office. One can imagine Trump is desperate to flee the fire hose of problems his administration faced this week, starting on Monday with this.
Sean Spicer is still refusing to confirm or deny whether or not the President of the United States is recording people in the White House without their knowledge.
The president revealed highly classified information to Russian officials during an Oval Office meeting last week.
Trump tried to shut down the Federal Bureau of Investigation probe of then National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and his conversations with the Russian ambassador. The U.S. Justice Department has named a special counsel to investigate the possible role Donald Trump's campaign played with Russia during and after the 2016 presidential election.
The president tweeting just now, quote, "This is the single greatest witch hunt of a politician in American history."
The entire thing has been a witch hunt. Believe me, there's no collusion.
President Trump apparently told the Russian officials with whom he met in the White House that Jim Comey was a nut job and that firing him took a lot of pressure off the president.
The Washington Post is now reporting that the Russia probe, which is now in the hands of a special prosecutor, has identified a current White House official as a significant person of interest. The White House isn't disputing that report either.
But hold on, there's one more thing. Former FBI Chief James Comey will testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee after Memorial Day. And joining me now is Malcolm Nance, Executive Director of the Terror Asymmetrics Project, Adrian Carrasquillo of BuzzFeed News, Matthew Miller, MSNBC analyst and former Justice Department spokesman, Nayyera Haque, former State Department spokesperson, and David French of the National Review. A mega panel, as it were. I'm going to start here at the table, Malcolm. There is a piece in Politico this morning that talks about the way that the U.S., through Donald Trump, is now viewed by our foreign friends and adversaries alike. Susan Glasser wrote this Politico piece and says that Trump is now viewed by European leaders as less dangerous and more in terms of words like chaos, circus, and laughingstock. Here's a quick quote. "People are less worried than they were 6 weeks ago, less afraid," a senior German government official with extensive experience in the United States told me. "Now they see the clownish nature," or as another German said on the sidelines of a meeting here devoted to taking stock of 70 years of U.S.-German relations, people here think Trump is a laughing stock. Can you assess for us whether what we've seen over the last week, the sharing of intelligence with Russians inside the Oval Office, the FBI investigation, the sort of circus around Donald Trump, is it seen as more dangerous to our allies, or is it seen as more ridiculous and a joke?
Well, it's interesting that they should write that, because Natabakos, former CIA analyst, did an analysis as the CIA would do it if the United States were a target by an intelligence agency.
Yeah.
And initially, we give everyone benefit of the doubt that there is some grand strategy, that there is this plan that is being laid out and executed in supervillain style.
Yeah.
We're finding out that's not the case at all. This is chaos. This is mayhem. This is a White House that has no internal organization, factions that are very clear and going at each other from one direction or the next. And let me tell you, if this were some third world nation right now, we'd be watching the army to see if the tanks are getting ready to move for a coup, right? Or if the guy jumps on a plane and flies to Monaco with all the money from the state. What we're seeing right now is the United States being viewed by the rest of the world as the clown show. But I think on the other hand, the reason that it's less dangerous than 6 weeks ago is because they also see the brilliant, just absolutely brilliant checks and balances the founding father put into place now coming into motion, and they feel that the president will now be given some guardrails that he's never had before.
And Nayyera, you know, as somebody who has spoken for the State Department, I mean, talk a little bit about this. You have now Jim Comey, his testimony imminent. We found out late on Friday that he will testify before the public hearings. He declined an invitation to do so before the Judiciary Committee in private. So our European allies obviously know that, Nayyera. And on the plane with Donald Trump are some of the people who have helped to build this kind of circus atmosphere, the Steve Bannons of the world, Jared Kushner, who is the president's son-in-law, who's got his own issues with whether he filed his foreign intelligence or his foreign, paperwork for basically being an agent of foreign clients. Stephen Miller, who had a lot to do with the Muslim ban. He's bringing that circus with him overseas. If you were still at the State Department, how would you deal with that?
It's a very, very challenging trip that they're embarking on, particularly for the first trip. I mean, the first trip is traditionally to an easy allied country where the security on your side and security on their side have a history of coordinating with each other, and you have the ability to make things work. And you don't try to throw yourself several logistical hurdles like trying to visit the old city in Jerusalem, which is historically and for thousands of years a very contentious, insecure environment. So there's security challenges all throughout this trip. There are political challenges trying to go from Saudi to the Vatican to Israel, all places where words really matter. Every word you say has thousands of years of history of implication behind it. And now we have a president who doesn't really view teleprompter or reading from a script as a priority. So there's the challenges logistically, but then the circus that you mentioned, it is a lot of people from the West Wing to be going on this trip. And what that indicates to folks who have done these trips before is there's not a lot of trust between the inner circle, because generally when you have somebody on the plane, they're communicating back to DC and communicating ahead to your team on the ground. So there's not a lot of trust if all of them feel like they need to be around the principal at all times. So exactly the kind of chaotic decision making that we're seeing here in DC is now going to be amplified on the world stage.
And Adriana, you were one of the journalists who tweeted out and were reporting out the literal yelling and screaming that was going on between members of the Trump team, some of whom are now on that plane or on this trip overseas. Is this a team that even can spend the time to focus on that one page of bullet points they need to give Donald Trump with his name in them to make him pay attention? Or are they still paying attention to their own personal potential issues, needing to lawyer up, needing to deal with Russiagate back home?
I think they certainly see, the president values loyalty, but has been at times in the last couple of weeks throwing his staff under the bus. I never saw, after the firing of Comey, I never saw the staff sort of in a shell-shocked way in the White House the way I did that day. And then I saw it again a week later when there was the reports that he gave classified information to the Russian officials. So, these are comm staffers who are sort of trying to figure out what the president has just done, how they're going to react. They say something one day, and the next day the president says to Lester Holt that no, actually I fired Comey because I wanted to, and he mentions the Russia investigation. So the comm staffers are definitely struggling, and when I was there with the reporters waiting to hear more on the firing and on the Russian involvement, I heard the staffers yelling at each other in a room that had Steve Bannon and Sean Spicer and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So it's definitely a time right now where there is not as much trust as there should be, and there's still problems going on, at the homeland while they're abroad on a foreign trip.
And Matthew, one of that, to that very point, I want to play a little bit of Dick Durbin and Claire McCaskill, who came out after a meeting with Rod Rosenstein, who is essentially the acting AG when it comes to all things Russiagate because of the recusal of Jeff Sessions. And this was on the question of whether or not this man is either the patsy or the initiator in terms of firing Jim Comey in the first place. And he wrote that infamous memo that got Jim Comey canned. Take a listen.
Do you believe that the Deputy Attorney General knew before he wrote that memo that James Comey was going to be fired?
Yes.
What was it that he said that led you to believe?
He knew the day before.
Did he indicate he was pressured into writing that memo?
No.
He knew that Comey was going to be removed prior to him writing his memo.
And Matthew Miller, Donald Trump and his merry band have left behind Rod Rosenstein as supposedly the person who the country should look to as sort of the credible person left at justice in terms of Russiagate. Is his credibility now damaged?
Absolutely. The fact that he knew that the president had already decided to fire Jim Comey, and he went along with it and gave him the justification to do it through this memo, really calls into question his independence. Because what you have to ask now is, did the president raise the Russia investigation, either in his conversations with the Deputy Attorney General, or did he raise them with Attorney General Sessions? Did Rod Rosenstein know about the conversations that Jim Comey had had with the president that were so inappropriate? The Deputy Attorney General in this case was supposed to be the man who protected the integrity of the Justice Department. There are a lot of questions about Jeff Sessions' independence, but Rod Rosenstein came up through the Justice Department as a career prosecutor, a U.S. attorney, and he was supposed to be the institutionalist who would stand behind its integrity. And by signing off on the firing of Jim Comey, by lending his reputation for independence, I mean, he gave Donald Trump the excuse he needed, and I think let down all of the people at the Justice Department that were depending on him to protect its independence.
And you know, David French, that leaves us with a problem where credibility, which supposedly flows down from the top, has been harmed all the way down. And of course, it does start at the top. I want to play Donald Trump, the President of the United States, responding even in a presser with the President of Colombia, where he's supposed to be focusing on U.S. policy in Latin America. He gets asked the question about his interactions with former FBI Director Comey. Let's take a listen to that.
Did you at any time urge former FBI Director James Comey in any way, shape, or form to close or to back down the investigation into Michael Flynn? And also, as you look back...
No. Next question.
And David French, at a time when this president is taking his administration and basically the reputation of the United States overseas to some of the most sensitive regions in the world, does the administration have any credibility?
Well, you know, I think it has a diminishing amount of credibility right now. I mean, certainly there are hardcore supporters. He's still maintaining a strong hold on his base. I think that's without question. But there's just an enormous and increasing amount of skepticism out of virtually everyone else. But I will say this regarding the independence of the DOJ. As far as the independence of the DOJ goes, they actually did take the ultimate step that they could take to establish independence by appointing a special counsel who's arguably the most independent person in the executive branch now, who can investigate this situation and investigate the allegations surrounding Russia's interference in the election. So right now, there is a degree of independence being exercised, and ironically enough, that independence is being exercised in large part because Trump was so undisciplined. It finally forced the deputy AG's hand.
Yeah, and lastly to you, Matt Miller, you now have the White House potentially trying to use an ethics rule potentially to undermine that special counsel. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to fly. I mean, ultimately, that decision is going to come down to Rod Rosenstein, whether to waive this provision and allow Director Mueller to investigate not just the president and his associates, but you know, Jared Kushner potentially. Yep. And that's a decision that Deputy Attorney General will make. Given who Bob Mueller is, given his reputation for independence and integrity, there's no reason to think that he won't approach that fairly. And if Rosenstein weren't to give him that waiver, I think that would be highly questionable.
Likelihood, Malcolm Nance, last word of a successful trip here overseas?
I think he'll have a successful photo op. As you can see in Saudi Arabia, he's very comfortable with the, you know, the guilt and glamour of Saudi Arabia. The question is, will anything come of it? He'll just bop through these 3 countries, and I think he'll get a talking to when he gets to the Vatican that he probably won't like.
From Pontifex. All right, Malcolm Nance, Adrian Carrasquillo, Matthew Miller, thank you very much. Naira Hawk and David French will be back later in the show. And up next, we'll explain how a special counsel could be the beginning of the end for Donald Trump. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.